I'm Ariana Grande.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Erivo.
And you're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Visit bpn.fm to discover more.
Hey everyone, welcome to an unusual episode of the Theater Podcast. I am Alan Seals, and the content you're about to hear was originally recorded for my other podcast called Was It Chance, which I co-host with my amazing friend Heather Vickery. But as soon as we finished this conversation, I knew it needed to live here. So our guest is David Armstrong, a true Broadway lifer, a director, producer, educator, and the author of Broadway Nation, How Immigrant, Jewish, Queer, and Black Artists Invented the Broadway Musical. He's done the work he's done just for this book and for theater in general. I mean, it just reframes the history of Broadway to celebrate the marginalized communities who helped build it from the ground up. And these are a lot of stories that we just don't know about because nobody talks about it now. And I'm so glad David is bringing all of this to light in his amazing book. But Heather and I had such a rich conversation with David about the creative risks he's taken, his leadership in the arts, and how embracing chance often leads to the most meaningful success. But whether you're a theater fan, a creative, or just love hearing about the moments that shape a career, this one's good. Can't wait to share it with you. Make sure to find me online on all the socials. You know what I normally say. Leave a rating, review, tell your friends. And now everybody, please enjoy this special crossover episode from Was It Chance with the incredible David Armstrong.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Was It Chance? This is the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And this guy is Alan Seals. Heather and I started off as two perfect strangers who met by chance and embraced opportunity. So now you, the listener, get to listen in, see how that works, as we chat with other successful people about the risks they've taken to put themselves on a path to creative success. Heather, our guest today, is so freaking cool.
I'm so excited. So excited. Tell everybody who's with us today, Alan.
So, well, first, before, I mean, like, how you doing? We got,
I'm okay.
You know, pre-show banter.
Pre-show banter. Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm good.
You thought
My
this interview
schedule is off today.
Yeah.
My timing, I'm confused. I thought one thing started at 11:30 and it was 11:15, and I thought this interview was at 12:30 and it was at 12. So I'm a little discombobulated, but we're working with it. We're rolling with it. It's Friday. Thank goodness.
Usually you're the first one here.
I know.
And like, hey, where's Alan? And I'm showing up exactly on start time. And I showed up 2 minutes early today.
Yeah.
Just for
and I was
our
5
guest.
minutes late.
And you were 5 minutes late. And I was like, what's up? All right, here we go. Here we go. Well, our
guest. I apologize to our awesome guest.
Our awesome guest is David Armstrong. And I've known this dude for a couple years, impressed with everything he has ever done or produced, just knows his shit. He is a theater lifer and author of the groundbreaking new book, Broadway Nation, How Immigrant, Jewish, Queer, and Black Artists Invented the Broadway Musical, which I have right here in front of me. This thing is a beast of information.
Also, usually my role. I'm usually the one holding up the book, and David sent me one, but it hasn't come yet, and I can't wait to read it.
Yes, it's a sweeping and inclusive retelling of Broadway's history that spotlights the vital roles of historically marginalized communities in the invention of America's signature art form. But wait, there's more. This is QVC right now. David
this is the longest intro you've ever done. Usually you're like, keep it short. I
know, but this dude's doing so much. Okay, he's the creator and host of widely acclaimed Broadway Nation podcast, which has reached nearly 300,000 listeners across more than 180 episodes. He has been the affiliate lecturer he serves currently as the affiliate lecturer at the University of Washington School of Drama.
Hey, that's where my daughter goes to school. University of Washington.
And let's see, his course on Broadway history directly inspired both the podcast and the book. He's got a 40-year professional career that let's just get into it with the questions.
I'm like, dude.
My God, David, welcome to Was It Chance?
It's my pleasure to be here, and our time is up, I'm sorry to say.
Heather was late and Ellen introduced for too long. So now we're done.
Everyone go get the book. It's really good. Say hi to Heather's daughter at University of Washington. And we're good. All right.
Wait, so are you in Washington?
I am in Washington right at this moment. I'm on Vashon Island, which is just a beautiful island, just less than 45 minutes away from downtown Seattle.
I love it. I love Seattle. I know not everybody loves it anymore. There's some issues, but I love it. And my girl chose to spend the summer. She stayed and did summer quarter at UW.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
she's there right now, not too far from you. I love
Not
that.
too far at all.
Would she
She's
be,
a film major, film
Yeah,
and
w-
history.
I was gonna say, would she be taking David's class at any point?
You know, an earlier iteration of her would have been she was a theater girl, and then I think in an effort to be as different from me as she could possibly be, she has rejected theater in every possible way. But you know, that acting, like she's a film major. She wants to write, direct, produce.
Right. She wants to
Yeah.
make some money.
I hope so. I don't know, right? Do
As
film
opposed to
majors
a
make
theater
money?
Well,
Yeah.
David, when did you get into theater? I started out by saying you're a theater lifer, but I mean, you've got a 40-year professional career, which, you know, you've been a director, producer, a playwright, a choreographer, which I didn't even know until recently.
That's how I started out. Yeah.
Oh, really? So, but
Yeah.
like, what got you into that when you were like a little kid? Little David, you were telling me
I was
before we
one
started
of those
recording, you were growing
weird
up in the
kids,
70s.
very weird, strange children who knew from the beginning, was just entranced with theater, with all things theatrical from 5 years old on, probably before that.
I love that.
Mostly through film and television, but I grew up in Cincinnati, which is a great arts town. And so there was lots of theater and although most of the theater I saw as a kid was High School Musicals and things like that I would see. But I was just entranced from the beginning. And then I was one of those, again, a weird child who would organize the whole neighborhood into doing shows
I love
that
that. See, my
I
kid
didn't
used
know
to do
what these
that.
words were then. I would produce and direct and write and star in.
That's so cool.
And, there'd be 20 kids doing a review on the patio kind of thing. Or sometimes a book I wrote, I'm sure I would get sued for this today, even as a 10-year-old.
Especially if it was Disney. If you were ripping off
obsessed.
Disney.
Well, it was Charlie Brown, so it's probably almost as bad. I was obsessed with You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, which was a brand new show. I was probably the first Broadway show. I didn't see it on Broadway, but I saw the national tour when it came to Cincinnati as a young kid because I was so obsessed with all things to do with peanuts, and fell in love with that show, and then wrote my own show called Snoopy the All-American Dog, which I just adapted and wrote some of the songs for, which I can't believe because I don't write songs anymore, but I did that at that time, and produced this show in the auditorium of the grade school that I went to, like over the summer.
That is so cool. You're right, though. You couldn't get away with that now because your
Mm-mm.
parents would have put it on social media to brag
Exactly.
about you. And then
Totally, it would have been everywhere, and I would
Charles Schultz would have
shut
been like,
down
hold on a
cease and
minute.
desist from
Charles Schultz,
himself.
would have come down and been like, he's either the greatest or we're suing him. Yeah. Probably.
Exactly.
But I
So
love that.
often say what I have done for my whole career, I started doing when I was 10.
Wow.
I
And was there any
made
other
theater from the beginning.
was there any other possible career path, or were you just like, I got to be involved with this somehow, some way? And then so you started to write, but at any point were you ever considering anything else?
There were things I thought about. Archaeology was something that always interested me.
Cool.
It's interesting because I think the things actually all kind of relate to one another, especially in terms of research and that kind of thing.
I was about to say,
That
yeah.
makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one that pops to mind as something I was considered, and I don't know, considered is too strong a word, but that I was attracted to, that I was, drew my attention. But really, it was show business from the very beginning and all along. And I didn't come from a show business family at all. There was no sort of it was not something I saw or knew how to do or had seen anybody do, except on on television, basically.
Were your parents supportive?
Yes, my mother was very supportive. My father died when I was 16.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
he was supportive prior to that, to a mind. He wasn't obstructive, let's put it that way.
There you go.
But yeah, I lobbied to go to dancing school. I started dancing school when I was 6 years old, and then went, through the rest of into high school and went to theater camps and theater school and stuff like that as a kid, outside of then things that were done at the grade school or the high schools that I went to.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And were you I mean, at any point, like, worried that going down the artistic path was too much of a risk? Did you ever like second guess any of this, or were you just whole hog all the way in? I'm going to do this and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, I was probably just an idiot and didn't think about any of that stuff.
Well, you had a passion and a drive. Yeah.
And looking back now, I moved to New York when I was 19. I'd got my equity card that summer at the Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera, dancing in the chorus of 6 shows there that year. And somebody else who was working there needed a roommate. And so I dropped out of college and moved to New York with $300 maybe in my pocket.
Wow. And
Which
your
now
mom
I just
wasn't
think
like, don't drop out of college? I mean, it worked out for you, but
yeah, I didn't get a lot of resistance to it. I don't know whether I allowed a lot of. It's hard for me to journey back in time to that moment. So this is like, the late 70s, 1979-ish. I can't really imagine how I did it or why anybody let me do it, but it worked out.
But you did it. I mean,
talk about, was it chance, like taking that risk and saying, yeah, okay, I'll drop out of school. Where were you going to school?
University of Cincinnati.
Okay.
For theater there?
Yeah, I was in the theater program and working with the musical theater program at CCM. I was enrolled in theater, but did all my classes at CCM. And part of what led me down the path of leaving is I ended up teaching some of the classes there when the instructors couldn't show up.
You're too advanced for the teachers.
So I kept going back and forth between Cincinnati and New York because I had a lot of opportunity to work there. That's where I first started working professionally as a choreographer. And I'm so grateful. The dedication in my book, I thought about, who am I going to dedicate this book to? And I ended up thinking I need to dedicate it to this group of people who took a chance on me, who believed in me before they had any right to do so, who gave me opportunities to, and just saw that there was something in me that was there, but I didn't. There's no reason they should have seen it at that time or taken the chance that they took on me. And I think that's an important thing, especially in terms of the theme of your podcast. It's sometimes you have to take a chance on somebody who you just have to take a little leap of faith. You see something in them and you go, I think this person can do this, and I'm going to give them the chance to do it.
What did they give you the chance to do? Was it teaching or performing?
Initially, for a lot of it depends. It was a variety of things. Some was performed, but mostly it was letting me run things, letting me direct, letting me choreograph, letting me whisper in their ear what I thought they should be doing, how they should be directing the show. Things like that. It was giving me leadership opportunities, really, that were before I probably was age appropriate to have those leadership opportunities.
I think that's so cool. And I'm actually curious. So you spent, I think I have this right, 18 years at the Fifth Avenue Theater?
Yes.
And as to play off of what you just said, like taking these risks, taking these chances, giving people opportunities, what creative risks are you most proud of, or were you the most surprised by in that 18-year tenure?
I mean, I think the thing that stands out the most would be the emphasis that I was placed and was able to place on new musicals, on developing new musicals. And taking a big organization like that down that path is a very challenging thing to do. Creating new work is expensive and challenging, but when you're doing it on a Broadway scale, which is what the Fifth Avenue Theater is and has to be because of the scale of the building, the scale of the organization, all that kind of stuff. People often think, and I write about this in the book, that when I got the job to go to here to Seattle, to the Fifth Avenue Theater from New York, I had only been to Seattle one time before that to direct a show at the Fifth Avenue Theater. And then that's when I threw my hat in this ring to be the first on-site, living in Seattle, artistic leader of the organization. Before that, it had been run, the artistic wing of it had been run out of Houston very successfully. But they wanted to change to a more full-time in-house in Seattle leader. So I got this job, and there was about 6 months between the time I got the job and the time I came to Seattle. And so every time I would run into any producers in New York that I knew, I would say, I'm going to Seattle. I think it'd be a great place to try out new shows,
Yeah.
keep us in mind, all that kind of stuff. And about 6 months after I got to Seattle, I got a call from the producers of the show that turned out to be Hairspray. And but what I talk about in the book is this was a big, giant risk for everybody involved at the time. There was no belief that Hairspray would be what Hairspray turned out to be, or even concept that it could be that. This was a movie, not a very well known, sort of a fringe, cult movie, written by John Waters, whose entire work was about offending middle class values.
I met John Waters once, just the same in person as he is on TV.
Hilarious.
Such
a
a great
hilarious person. I remember him standing in my office. This is a side note, but it's a funny story. And talking about he had just been with Roseanne in Los Angeles. And he said, she has a new face. I said, John, what do you mean? She says, she has an entirely new face. And what she wanted was any essence of her parents to be removed from her face.
Wow.
And
that's fascinating. And now knowing what we know about her now.
Exactly. You can understand why that sticks in my mind after 25 years. Yeah.
Wow.
But he was hilarious. It was great. But my point is that that's not somebody that you think is going to write or who's going to be the source material for mainstream musical theater hit. None of the writers had ever written a Broadway show before, except for Tom Meehan, who was, but Mark and Scott had not ever. They had very successful careers, but not on Broadway, not as Broadway songwriters. It was a new, untried team, and even Harvey was not really a very big star, especially in Seattle at that time. For people in Seattle, you would say his name, and you'd get sort of who's that kind of thing. So this was an unknown quantity in every aspect, and to make that decision to devote the resources that a theater company needs to devote to any kind of new work, and especially for the first time, more or less, that the Fifth Avenue was going to do that, was just a giant leap of faith that, looking back, I understand why we made it, and it was clear we needed to make it. But I remember going to the reading in New York where the show was just sensational. And I remember calling my partner, who was the managing director at that time, and she said, well, how is it? How is it? I said, well, if they don't fuck it up, this will be the greatest show ever. But again, there's no guarantee that they're not going to screw it up. There's somewhere along the way. Shows are so hard, so difficult to bring all the pieces together. But, 9 times out of 10, they don't come together. They don't work. And just this show ended up being magic. And of course, was an incredible thing for the theater and for the Fifth Avenue to have this first, jump in the pool of this kind of thing be so successful. But there was just no, and it didn't, people say, oh, you must have made a lot of money. No, over 20 years, we made a lot of money. But that it didn't even pay for itself.
Because nobody knew then.
Because nobody knew. Nobody came until the reviews came out. And then the last week it was sold out.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. And now we're back.
I mean, your entire career has been about taking intentional risk for creative success and embracing opportunity. And as I'm not as close to Broadway as Alan is. I'm a theater kid. I'm like you. Like I felt it from the beginning. I have a theater degree, but I don't. I use all those skills, but I don't work in the theater. The time that's spent, the heart that's given to doing these things before they're big, that's where the real artistry is. That's where the real creativity is, and so exciting and so much joy. And we wouldn't have, people forget, we wouldn't have Broadway as Broadway exists if we didn't have the Fifth Avenue Theater. Like those kinds of things, not necessarily specific that, right? But the other theaters in other towns that try things and explore and play and rework.
That was where I was going to ask next, is just like what what makes a theater a good place to develop something out of town? Like, why did Fifth Avenue get this reputation? Why does La Jolla have it? Why does the Muni have it? Like, there
Great
are specific theaters I think about.
Chicago. We do it in Chicago.
Right. That I think
Absolutely.
about, like, the Huntington in Boston, right? Like, there are theaters that I'm like, all right, if you're going to go out of town, there's 10 that I would pick from. Well, how did they get there? Is it because of people like you just having
First and
conversations?
foremost, it's the audience. You have to have an audience you have to have a theater town audience.
Fair.
And I used to say that there were 3 great theater towns in the United States. There was New York, Chicago, and Seattle. Because when I came to Seattle, and I benefited from that, being established before I got there to a great extent, there were 5 major theater companies. And then a whole host of mid-level and small-scale theater companies, fringe theaters or similar to Chicago. And there were almost no other cities that had an audience that would support that of a major size, that would support that, number one, that volume of theater. And then and then you have to have a subset of that audience who's willing to and wants to see something new and wants to go on the ride of a new work. And I think that's it. There are much bigger cities than Seattle that have, in terms of population, but don't have that kind of audience. And it's just the way even San Francisco doesn't support theater in the way that Seattle has.
What is the ride though? Like, what about the ride? Because so what do you mean by that? Because as an audience member, if I lived in Seattle, I would have my season tickets, and then I would show up for this new thing I've never heard of called Hairspray, and then I would sit down and I'd enjoy it and be like, oh, that Harvey guy, he's really got a future,
But the ride is not every show is going to be Hairspray. We did 19 new musicals in the time I was there. And the percentage, this is unbelievable. I never would have predicted this. It's not real, but it is real. 9 of those shows went to Broadway. But even with those 9 shows, not every show was Hairspray. Sometimes you're going to have to want to go to see something that may not be completely done and may not be entirely successful. I'm happy to say that every single one of those shows had sensational elements to them, but not all of them worked, because you don't know if the show's going to work until it's up in front of people, until you're collaborating with the audience. So you really need to have an audience that's willing to collaborate on a new work.
So and
not everybody is.
The artistic director, you're like the boss of the bosses of determining what productions happen in a season, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So what do you like?
Correct.
Obviously.
Well, no.
He didn't say it like that. Don't put that on him.
No, that's how I took it.
He was like, correct statement.
Correct
Accurate.
statement. Yes, idiot.
It's all my fault. That's the way I used to say it. Yeah.
But so are you always looking for a balance? Is an artistic director always looking for the balance of new works versus established IP, so that you can, you want to keep the theater going. You can't just do things that aren't going to earn money. It is a business.
Yes.
So, what was that kind of discussion process like every season, or where you're evaluating like, hey, can we bring this in, or should we bring that? Or is there anything you look back on that you're like, damn, we should have brought that in? Like, did you pass on Hamilton?
I didn't pass on Hamilton. I'm happy to say, but yes, there were things that I'm trying to think of what the biggest one was that we passed up or didn't. It didn't. Usually, it's not that we passed. It didn't work out. The timing didn't work out. The economics didn't work out. All that kind of stuff. One I regret that didn't happen was because I think it would have helped the show and it would have been so much better than the show ended up being. Was we were supposed to do the pre-Broadway of Bombay Dreams.
Ooh.
And they ended up not doing a pre-Broadway and went straight to New York, and the show never got finished. They didn't do the work that I think could have been done. I flew to London to see it and was so excited about the idea that they were going to come and do it and have this chance to work on it. And so I think that's a real missed opportunity, that one.
I love hearing you say that, because I know that we have a lot of listeners who do different sorts of creative things. And every time we have really gifted creative on this show who talks about the editing and the reworking process. I just think it's such a gift for people to recognize that you are not supposed to get this right the first time or the second time or maybe even the 10th time. Like there is a lot of work that goes into making something ready to be consumable by the big audience. And I just think it's really easy to forget that and be hard on yourself.
Well, and people always, I think there's an old expression that's very true. Shows aren't written, they're rewritten.
And they're never finished.
Which means that writing it is just step one.
Yeah.
Now, and then what I think the great talents really are able to do is you always write something you want to see. You write something, you hope an audience is going to want to see it, but you can't write to an audience because you don't have any idea what the audience actually wants, even if they would tell you what they want. It probably means they want to see the thing they saw before, not this new thing. They don't want to see a retread of the thing they saw before.
Wow.
And so then you've got to then listen to the audience, and the great ones sit in the theater and go, oh, I feel what the audience is telling me. Now, you can't ask them directly because they'll probably tell you the wrong thing, but you have to be able to get inside their experience of it while you're writing it. I mean, and the same thing is true now. I know from experience with writing this book that books aren't written, they're rewritten also.
Your editors are worth your weight in gold for sure.
Totally. And my book was totally, my editor, Dom O'Hanlon at Methuen Drama, was so helpful because after I'd written the book, he came back and said, let's talk about the structure a little bit. And I restructured the book substantially based on his input, which made the book infinitely better than it was. The exact same content, just how that was laid out and presented was what changed.
Well, speaking of which, writing the books, Broadway Nation, the podcast, and the book. The podcast came first, obviously. That's how we got connected. The podcast is on Broadway Podcast Network with this podcast and many others in the home for everyone who loves theater and Broadway. Shameless plug. So go listen to Broadway Nation. When did you decide to start the podcast and why? But then also, why focus it on immigrant, Jewish, queer, and Black artists?
And thank you.
And thank you for that as well. But yes.
Well, so this started when I stepped down from my job at the Fifth Avenue Theater in 2018, after 18 years of being there. I got approached by the University of Washington to create a course on the history of the Broadway musical. So that was the first moment that I thought, well, what am I going to teach? What's the focus of this course? I know I can teach a course on the history of the Broadway musical, but what do I think about it? What's my take on that? And this was something that had been percolating for years, this idea that, and I didn't invent this idea, but what I did was collate all these things. There have been books and documentaries about the Jewish influence, the Jewish creators of the Broadway musical. There are books about the gay creators of the Broadway musical. But it had been occurring to me that this was an art form that was almost entirely created by outsiders, by marginalized people and groups. And I thought, well, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And it happened because at the turn of the century, when show business is actually being created and invented, there was this great opportunity that nice people wouldn't do. Respectable people would not deign to lower themselves to be in show business.
Well, you're in the right company here on this podcast.
I know, right?
We're down at the bottom.
I think, though, that what that speaks to, and it's been coming up a lot more, I think now, is that art is inherently political.
Totally.
Right? I'm queer, Black, Jewish artists, like our existences are inherently political. And when we can channel that into art, you get Broadway.
Absolutely. And as I started doing the research, it doubled down on how true this was, how absolutely this was not a sort of concept I was putting on the top of something. This is absolutely true. 90, I don't have an exact percentage for you because you'd have to count everyone who ever worked in the Broadway musical, but an overwhelming percentage of the inventors and creators and sustainers of this art form have come from these marginalized groups, and still to this day. And what's so interesting and maybe sort of bizarre about that is what they created then becomes this centerpiece of American culture.
Yeah.
And for the mid of the 20th century, especially, is the prime, is the signature American cultural form. And yet it's all coming. I think there's a subversive element that's in there, which I talk about, especially the last section of the book is about the themes of the Broadway musical, the three ubiquitous themes of Broadway musicals. It's a very progressive art form, which people do not perceive it that way because it's been so popular.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what makes it so cool is it's political, but people don't know it. It was fascinating.
Totally.
When Wicked, the first movie, came out, the people who inherently had no idea what a political, how can you,
But it was going to
did
be
we
about
watch the
fascism?
same movie? Yeah. Did we watch the same movie? You think Elphaba is Trump? What? Like, I'm like, how? I don't know, but it's wild, right? Because it will shift, those folks aside, it will shift people's perspectives and they don't even know what's happening because it's become so mainstream.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that fascinates me. I can't document this, but I wonder what the effect of 100 years of Broadway musicals that almost entirely promote liberal humanistic values has had on our culture. And it'd be easy to say now, well, not much, apparently. But how much worse would it be if that force weren't in our culture?
Right.
Well, and so much incredible art is being made right now because, you get a diamond from pressure.
Absolutely.
I want to go back something that I meant to ask earlier. Edna Turnblad, the mother character in Hairspray, was that always a man in drag, or did that evolve? Was that John Waters' idea?
That's because in the movie it was Divine. In the original John Waters movie, that role was played by Divine, who was a drag queen.
Yeah,
and it was the star of many of his movies. Sort of John Waters' muse was Divine, and that idea, it was all of the creators of the musical just knew inherently that they needed to that needed to be repeated. In the musical, that idea was important somehow. And it's interesting because it adds this sort of subliminal. I mean, that show is about, fat phobia and body image issues, and of course racism and segregation and all the things that it's about. It's also about economic imbalance. It's very much a very a great story actually about economics and the politics of polarization of income, and that having Edna somehow played by a man as a woman, but not in drag. This man plays a woman,
just a woman. Yeah,
you believe, and the whole audience, a mainstream middle class conservative audience.
Except, can you imagine if it was released right now?
Exactly, but within 5 minutes of watching it, you believe it's a woman. You relate. What's so interesting was to see the audience relate to that character after 3 laughs of, oh, that's Harvey in a dress, then, oh, that's Edna. And then to invest in that relationship between the two of them adds this sort of gay subtext to it without ever stating it. And it's not linear or logical. And that's happening in every high school in America where Hairspray is being done today.
Well, that's why I asked that question in this point in our conversation, because we were talking about the political statements and the way that people are expressing themselves. Because, it premiered on Broadway August 15th, 2002, at the time that George W. Bush was president. We've got a Republican president. And all of this just goes out there to kind of, it's a silent protest that's influencing people in a way they're not even realizing, and allowing you to see things in a way like, oh yeah, 2 people that happen to both be assigned male at birth can play like, can have a gay relationship, or, whatever the case is, right? Like, it's just kind of so beautiful to me how all this comes together.
I agree with you completely. They become these icons for healthy heterosexual marriage, even though we're watching these two men on stage play this out. So somehow in your mind, you're going, well, there's no difference.
Right.
There is no difference. It's two people.
Yeah.
Well, so was that
having a marriage?
The creative risk you had going. I don't mean to harp on this. I promise I'll move on. I think it's fascinating though. The creative risk that you and the team had to push yourselves through to be like, all right, we're going to do this show written by this guy who is controversial in and of himself about something that is racist, that deals with racism, fat phobia, gay relationships, all the things you said. Was that an easy thing of like, yes, we're going to take a stand, we're going to put this on stage, or was it like, whoa, we're going to like shoot our reputation and shoot ourselves in the foot with?
Did you know what kind of risk you were taking potentially?
Yeah, that's a better question.
I don't think we thought a lot about the political risk of it. And again, this was a different
and it turns out
even
it wasn't,
25 years
right?
ago.
Yeah.
And it was not a political risk. I think the risk we took was is there a mainstream audience for this story? Given all those things. Will a mainstream audience want to see a wild, crazy musical comedy about very serious issues, about what's happening in our world every day? And would the friction between those elements work or not work?
Yeah.
So to me, it was more of an economic risk. Can we get enough people to show up? I mean, that was what I lived with for 25 years. People would always say to me, what's the hardest part of your job as the producing artistic director? I'd say, paying for everything. That's the hardest part of my job.
Right. Making sure enough people buy tickets.
We get the grants, we or donate money or do whatever they need to do to do what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what caused me to Google this. I was just looking up the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy dates. Like it was created in...
Bill Clinton did it.
Yeah. It was Bill Clinton. Created in 94, right? Is that what I was just looking? Yeah, it's 93. November 93 is when it went into effect. Repealed not until 2010. So again...
Wow. Yeah, this is 2001 when we're doing Hairspray.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and what I did... So I want to pull the through line, right? You got hired at UW to teach this class. And you were like,
we were on Oh, yeah. My bad.
Certainly I can teach this class, but what do I really think about it, and what do I want the takeaway to be? And that leads to the podcast, right? So I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey and then how you turned that into a book.
First it led me to teaching the course, which I did in 2018 was the first time I taught it. Maybe it was into 2019, somewhere in that period. I can't remember exactly which quarter I started in. And then what led to the podcast, like so many other things, was the pandemic, mostly because I had the podcast in my head after teaching the course. I thought, well, I should probably take these lectures and do a popular version of these lectures that would make a podcast. This is perfect material for the kind of podcast I like to listen to. I love to listen to the History Chicks. I don't know if you know their podcast, but they have a fantastic women's history podcast, or the Bowery Boys, which have a very fantastic New York history podcast. So those were sort of inspirations for me of, I could do the same thing with musical theater history. And so I was sort of thinking about that, sort of researching it, those kind of things. And then it was clear that the pandemic was happening. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to, I knew then I was going to have to teach remotely the next time I taught, spring quarter of that year. So I thought if I start making these podcasts, then maybe they can be a tool I can actually use
that's smart.
to teach with, because I can't give these lectures in person anymore. And so that is really what jump-started the podcast. And I don't remember what exactly year or what month we debuted Broadway Nation on the Broadway Podcast Network, but it was...
You'll know in a minute. Alan can't not look that up. So.
Exactly. I'm sure he will. The font of information. So I think that answered the question.
Pulling up your podcast feed. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay. So where did the book come from that? And what was different about teaching the class versus the podcast versus the book?
So the main difference between teaching the class and the podcast is obviously in the course, you have exams.
Yeah, of course, right.
The audience has to respond to me in the course, and I get to grade them.
Oh, wow, your first episode came out April 29th, 2020. Yeah, so like right after COVID shut everything down.
Yeah. It was that was very interesting. That the whole timing behind that. So yes, and of course the podcast is created more for a general audience, theater loving theater. It's a very scholarly podcast, but it's not treated in a scholarly manner. But I think
Like
that's
our
basically
show.
how I teach also.
Yeah,
like
just
this
like
show,
our show.
exactly, yeah.
Just like it.
We're very scholarly, but people don't know it.
They're completely unaware of how scholarly it is.
Do I know it? I don't know.
I know it.
Okay,
You've
good.
hidden it so well, so subversive. And then the book came about because the first season of my podcast was basically a chronological history of the Broadway musical, mostly me talking with guests. I have a co-host often named Albert Evans, who I've worked with a lot and was a great historian. And then occasionally other guest authors and things, but telling this whole story chronologically. So when I got through that, I thought, well, now what am I going to do for season 2? How's this podcast going to continue? But luckily, there have been so many other books that have come out about musical theater and musical theater history
You had
that
resources.
it sort of evolved into an interview podcast. So it was the same subject matter, just sort of drilling down on subjects that I talked about chronologically in the first season. And so that's continued through now, 200 episodes. And during that, the Dom O'Hanlon, who is my editor, I had interviewed a number of authors of books that he had published on the podcast. So he got to know the podcast and got to know that I was teaching this course through talking about it on the podcast. And then he approached me about writing the book based on that. Because
Cool.
Methuen and Drama sees this as thinks there's a need in the market, in the textbook market, for a new textbook about the history of the Broadway musical that is different from the ones that have existed before. And there's some terrific books out there, but because it brings this sort of new scope to it, they were very interested in that. So that's, knock on wood, that is what will happen over the next year, is that universities and educational programs across the country and the world really will adopt this as a textbook.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. And now we're back.
We have actually had several conversations with authors that come to mind about revising history, sharing hidden history, shifting the perspective of who you see in history. What comes to mind? Actually, the episode that's out on our feed right now is Victoria Christopher Murray, who did Harlem Rhapsody, which tells the story of Jessie Faucette, who was the first female editor of the NAACP's literary magazine, right? Nobody knew her name. Nobody even knew she existed. And I think this is beautiful because you're doing this for Broadway. And it's not that we don't necessarily know all their names, but you're right in that marginalized people created this phenomenon, and they just haven't. It's hidden history, and so bringing this forward is just such a gift.
And for me, that's one of the things that's been so rewarding about doing this, and because I learned so much, beginning with creating the course, is discovering people whose names either I had heard but didn't really know what they'd done or who they were. And shows the same way, shows that you might have heard mentioned once or twice, but you didn't understand that these were big hit shows that had impact not only on the audience but on the other creators. And just being now able to show people the significance of these artists. And women are very much part of this too. The other part of the story that's important to me is people say, well, there weren't any no one was allowed to create art back in those days. And there were Black artists at the center of the Broadway musical from the very beginning, from 1900 on.
Yeah.
their story is a complicated one because it ebbs and flows. They get shut out for periods and then they come back. But there were 2 decades of Black musical theater created by Black artists, Black writers, Black directors, Black choreographers, Black stars. So between 1900 and 1910, approximately, there's a dozen shows on Broadway, 20, I think almost 20, that are written by Black artists that are big hits that I almost had no knowledge of, even being immersed in theater for 40 years. And then they unfortunately go away for a decade, and that comes back with Shuffle Along, which is a story we do know, at least we know that. But what people don't know is that Shuffle Along starts a wave of Black musical theater that, again, is another 20 or more shows that happen over the next decade into the 1930s until the Depression sort of, puts an end to that. And it becomes so hard to put anything on Broadway for white artists, much less for Black artists, to be given the opportunity to do that. That starts to fade away.
And that still happens today.
And it still happens today.
Because no one can spend anything.
We need to recognize these patterns and not let them happen again. Because we see a similar thing in the 1970s, where there's Black artists totally centered in so much of the work that's being done on Broadway. And then by the 1980s or the 90s, really, that disappears again.
Thank you, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about that, because with now 2025, the age of the internet, social media, everything, news cycles, everything just moves so much faster. And so what you were just describing was coming in waves of decades. But coming out of the pandemic, end of 2020 into 2021, there were so many Black written plays that reopened on Broadway first, and everyone was like really praising all of this representation that had been lacking for a long time. And now I feel like today, 25, that's kind of just gone already, and it's only been 4 years. So are we just like speeding up? This is a cycle that repeats, and like what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I mean it's a hard question. I think you might be right to a certain extent. I do think that the book almost entirely focuses on shows that were hits, because those are the shows that I think had impact for the most part. Once in a while you can say, here's a show that was unsuccessful, that was a flop, that had tremendous impact either on other writers, and there are a few of those. But mostly I'm talking about work that had tremendous impact on the culture.
Yeah.
Which you can't really tell until
later.
Until years later when you look back.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know right now, and it's why the last, third of the book or fourth of the book was the hardest part to write, because we're in the middle of the history of the 21st century. So for the first, we're 25 years into it. So the first 10 years of that, you can say, yes, Hairspray was an important show. The Producers was an important show. Rent's actually in the 20th century, but you can sort of name things that have established themselves definitely as being part of the history of the Broadway musical. But what's happening in the last 5 years, it's really hard to tell, and it's hard to tell what the trends are. Yeah. And will those artists who didn't quite have their shows succeed eventually
do they still make an impact?
With the next show and with the shows that are coming up. So I don't know. But you're right. We have to be aware that we run in these patterns, and my students are often completely surprised by this, because they just think everything has gone on a path of progressive, maybe a very low grade, but we're more evolved than we were, 20 years ago or 100 years ago. And Cassine Gaines, who wrote that great book about called Broadway, When Broadway Was Black, he says that there were more Black people on Broadway in 1926 than there are on Broadway today.
Wow.
So sad.
That is terrible.
Well, so David, I'm curious, what was the thing that surprised you most when you were doing the research to write this book? What fact were you like mind blown about the most?
I think first and foremost was that first decade of Black musical theater, which is just completely off everyone's radar. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with significant artists, people like Bob Cole, who's a name nobody knows, who's probably as important as so many white artists that we do know their names from that period, but and again, part of the reason it's not all racism, although I guess it's elements of racism that we don't know them,
Just
or we
the
forgot about them.
systemicness. Yeah.
It's systemic, and it's also a lot of those artists died very young,
Mhm.
probably because they didn't have access to healthcare, and healthcare wasn't
Yeah.
very good.
Or
and
living in safe communities or whatever.
and where most of them were children of, or had children or grandchildren of slaves, of people who'd been enslaved, and who knows what kind of, legacy that would have physically, even on your body.
Yep.
So almost all of that whole wave of first died in their 40s or even younger than that.
Wow.
So sad.
So, and then with the queer artists, most
The
of them
AIDS
didn't have
epidemic.
children, even though they had long lives and long careers. People like Hassard Short, who I think is one of the people I would most want people to find out who he was. He's a director, choreographer. He's the one who invents Broadway staging, basically.
Holy cow.
He is, and he does dozens and dozens of shows, starting in the teens and going all the way into the 1950s. Big, giant hit shows that he is it's hard to determine exactly. He was a dancer. But he wasn't. He often worked with other choreographers, but he's responsible for the staging of the show, for putting it on the stage. And he's one who innovated. He had the show that did the first turntables, the first double turntables on the stage. He was the one who decided to put lighting on the balcony rail and get rid of footlights. So which
So
is
people could
something
see.
standard today. Well, and just that you didn't have that barrier, that sort of artificial
Yeah.
barrier. You now put them on the front of the balcony, spotlights there. He invented all this stuff, and we don't know his name, and he didn't have any children. And so his legacy didn't get sustained the way other artists of his caliber did at the time, or have since then.
Somebody should write a book just about him, like a historical fiction.
I was just thinking, I would love to have.
I want to read that.
I want you to sell the book rights, Broadway Nation, to Steven Spielberg, and I want a 5-season massive television show, this arc of just with all this drama and romance and backstabbing
But wait,
totally.
Has anybody approached you about
Not
movie
yet.
rights?
Not
Okay,
yet.
we're going to plant that seed. We're manifesting that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would. There are some incredible stories that I often think, as I read, as I was researching this, well, that's a Netflix miniseries. Why isn't somebody doing that story, telling that story?
Why
Look,
not
if
you?
Lynn can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, why not you, man?
Well,
what would you do? What would you want to pick out and make into a little? What if this is a whole TV show called Broadway Nation, and every season, it's kind of like True Detective. Every season's a different arc.
Oh
Is
yeah.
a different artist? I mean, I'd probably start with Dorothy Donnelly. Which, have you ever heard that name?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so Dorothy Donnelly, among the many Dorothys that were famous back in that period, it's like there was this whole world of them. But Dorothy Donnelly was
The Dorothy decade.
She originally was an actress, a star actress at the turn of the century on Broadway. She then went to playwriting. She created plays and musicals. She wrote the music and the lyrics for a dozen or so hit Broadway shows, including The Student Prince. I mean, big famous shows. The longest running show of the 1920s is The Student Prince. And she wrote the music or the book and the lyrics for that.
Wow.
And many of those shows she directed as well.
Amazing. We need to partner you with the people who are doing the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
they're doing such a good job on historical.
Well, and that
fiction.
whole black subplot this black
Yes.
story that they're telling there is so interesting to me, because there is this whole world of black theater that's happening in
At the same
Chicago,
time.
actually, and in New York
Yeah.
at the same time or just
Wow.
after. That is a story we just don't know and isn't.
I feel
being
good
told.
about this.
Yeah, you totally need to be a consultant on this, on some sort of historical fiction.
This needs to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing a good job with that show. I love the Gilded Age.
Yeah, it's gotten so much better. I wasn't that. I think maybe because I was expecting Downton Abbey, and I was such a big fan of Downton
I've never
Abbey.
seen Downton Abbey. So
It's the greatest television ever done, as far as I'm concerned. And I sincerely believe that. I think it's one of the best television series in history.
That's
I
how I
haven't
feel about
watched a
Schitt's
You
Creek.
can't
single
judge it from the
Downton.
movies. The movies are not very good. The movies are just sort of like fan fiction kind of thing. But yeah.
But I have a thing is I listen to a lot of memoirs. I love to learn about people and things that I wouldn't otherwise know about. And I will do some very obscure ones. My partner's always like, it's really strange that you picked that one. I'm like, yeah, but I love to learn about life experience and that's why we do this show. It's like literally my idea. Like, what led you here? What's your backstory? Why? And then we impact people we don't even know how. And I want to ask you this question, and I know we are getting close to needing to wrap this, but obviously this work you're doing is beautiful and impactful. Can you pinpoint any, like maybe when you were teaching or something where what you shared, you can, like, it changed something for somebody else?
I'm trying to think of it, trying to pinpoint it into one moment, but I do feel confident that with, now after teaching for the last 4 or 5 years, this course multiple times, and I have it's a big lecture class. It's 100 students. So I don't have the downside of that is I don't have a lot of one-on-one interaction with each of those 100 students like any other lecture class. But I can tell, and I've been seeing just people's eyes open, because of course the book and the course I teach is as much about American history as it is about the Broadway musical, because the two things are totally intertwined.
Sure.
So to see that idea that, this is not, number one, I think people are not taught a lot of history anymore. And there's some, I think, are coming to the class surprised that it's going to be about history, even though it's clearly
literally says that. Yeah.
It literally says this is a history of the Broadway musical. So I think that this whole understanding that this is an art form that has been around for now 120 plus years, depending where you decide to start it, and that it is a continuum. It starts I think one of the things most remarkable about the musical, and you can say this about theater in general, but especially the musical theater because it's so collaborative, is that it's a handed down art form, almost like a medieval craft, like you're a stonemason, and you teach this next person who teaches the next person who teaches the next person, and you can trace those connections throughout the history of the art form.
That is beautiful. I love that.
The centerpiece of the book, I call these legacy chains. I trace one of those legacy chains, which starts with Otto Harbach, who is a name a lot of people won't know, but he was a big famous songwriter and librettist back starting in the teens. And everyone would know he wrote the lyrics to "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." So that's probably his most famous lyric. He is the direct mentor of Oscar Hammerstein II. He's matched up by Oscar's uncle, who's a producer. Oscar's uncle, who's a producer, to mentor him and to work with him so that Oscar can learn how to write musicals, can learn how to do this. Jeez. Then Oscar becomes the direct mentor, very famously, to Stephen Sondheim.
What's he done?
Who then becomes a direct mentor, exactly, to Lin-Manuel Miranda is the example I use in the book, but he mentored several other people, John Larson, and it goes on. He was so giving with his knowledge and his mentorship because of what he experienced with Oscar, probably because of what Oscar had experienced with Otto Harbach. So between those four individuals, you get 4 degrees of separation. You get the entire history of the Broadway musical.
Jeez.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That's the center, or what I call the intermission aspect of the book.
I love history so much. No one's going to care about this question but me, but I'm just really curious. When you teach this lecture at the University of Washington, do you teach it in the class? Shut up, Alan. Do you teach it in the same building they teach the dinosaur class in?
I do not.
Oh.
I do not.
What is the dinosaur class? I don't know.
It's their most popular class. The problem is it's only a 2-credit class. It's the history of dinosaurs.
Well, tell your daughter that my course provides 2 requirements.
Does it give history? Because that's She's a double
Doesn't
major.
give history.
Oh, it should.
It gives an art requirement she probably doesn't need because she's in the, and it also gives a diversity requirement. So part of the reason it's so popular, I can't take all the credit for it, is people want to get 2 requirements in one course. But
that's so cool. I'm going to tell her. She's fast tracking. Again, nobody cares about this, but she's going to graduate a year early. I don't, it's not my favorite choice that she's making.
But why?
Oh, we talk about that offline. But I don't think she actually is thrilled with this choice either, but this is what's happening now. So she's going to graduate next spring with a double major in film and history.
wow, graduating early with a double major, that's impressive.
Wow. Yeah, she like just left yesterday. Wait a second. I'm getting
Wow.
too old for this world.
That's how I feel too. But I want to take your class. Can I audit it? I'm not in Seattle.
Right?
It's a bummer.
I often teach it. I didn't do it this summer, but I often teach it remotely during summer quarter.
I want to.
So
I will
hopefully
do
next year.
it. Will
Yeah, I
you? Will
wanna
you let me
audit it.
know if you
I
do it
will
next
audit
year?
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be so into that. I'm the weirdo that. Okay, years ago, we have to wrap this show. Years ago, somebody said to me, literally like 25 years ago, what would you do if you won the lottery? And my answer was, without question, it might be different now, but back then it was, I would go and get my PhD. And they were like, why?
In what?
You don't need more education. You won the lottery. And I was like, because I could afford to learn all these things.
You wouldn't have to work at the same time while you have. Exactly. I totally understand that.
Now I would just travel. That's my answer. Well, I would give away a lot of money. And
Hire a private tutor so you could get your PhD while you're traveling.
Exactly.
I'm getting my PhD right now in metaphysical science very, very, very slowly over the course of like 10 years.
Well, then, all right, we've taken so much of your time. Final question that we love to use to wrap up all these episodes. Just simply, what is your relationship with failure?
I mean, it's a great question because you can't take risk without confronting failure at times.
Yeah.
And having to, looking back, I often think about, especially in terms of shows that I've either developed or directed or been involved with in some way, the shows that didn't quite get there, the ones that got away is the way I think of them, is like that should have been a great show, and we just didn't quite crack that little 10%, which is really the difference between success and failure.
Yeah. Oof.
Is,
that's a painful truth.
And I think about that. Each of those shows had fantastic elements, show-stopping songs, incredibly moving numbers or scenes or things like that, as good as any other show. But usually it's a story problem, is you can't quite solve the story. You can't quite make it pay off in the way that it needs to pay off for the audience to go out. That difference between, well, I kind of liked it, and wow, that was great.
Yeah. I've read books like that where I'm like,
totally. We experience it all the time.
It was close.
And theater's even worse because you can go to a movie and be disappointed by it, and it doesn't affect you physically. Whereas I think when you go to see a show, a play or a musical, and it doesn't work, because you're a participant in it, your whole entire being is physically trying to make it work, to will it to work, to be,
so
come on, we got to make this work. We're in this together. You have to do the thing I need you to do, whatever that is. We don't know what it is. And we are exhausted by it. And it's why I think why people who don't like going to the theater is because they've never seen anything good. They've only been to things where their body exhausted them and their mind exhausted them. So that's their experience of the theater.
Oh my gosh.
I think it's a visceral disappointment.
Mind blown.
It is such a fascinating perspective. And because art is up for a personal interpretation, and what you love and what you don't love and what,
But even when
it's
you
a hard job.
go to something that there's things I attend and see that I don't particularly like, but I understand, but it's well done.
You can appreciate it. Yeah,
and
same.
so it doesn't fail me in that regard. It doesn't make, I don't come out, having a mental and physical crisis response to the failure of the show the way you often do with something that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you don't do that in a movie because it's not happening in real time.
That's really interesting.
It won't change. You don't do that with television.
I wonder too if
turn it off, or you read your.
That's true.
Turn away.
Yeah.
Or you could stay there and leave it on and scroll your phone.
Yeah, you start
same
looking at
time.
your phone. I mean, that's a good sign that the TV show is not engaging. Is now you're on your phone,
Right.
but it doesn't affect you physically or mentally in the same way.
That's
So
what
I don't know if that
say.
answers your question, but that failure is really disappointing, really frustrating because you're so close to something working and you can't quite get it to do that. And if you had more time or more money or more opportunity, you can always look back and go, well, I still think we could have solved that, but we just didn't discover it. And the story of all these authors and all these shows is sometimes they don't find that solution till the very last second.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Sunday in the Park with George is such a great example. He wrote that song that really ties it together. I forget what that's called. It's a number. It's like I can't think what it is. In previous, like the day before the show opened at Playwrights Horizons, and the show didn't work. The audience hated the show until that song was in there, and then all of a sudden the show was so is the show we know today, and so moving and successful. So if he hadn't done that, he'd be in one of those situations like, why did this? How we were so close, but it didn't work.
Well, it's even like we were talking about Aladdin before we started recording, right? Like they were that came through the Fifth Avenue, the Disney version that we know now, right? And came through it. It went through many iterations in Seattle and then Toronto. They changed a bunch of stuff that didn't work. Still took a chance, brought it to Broadway, and they were rewriting that. Literally, like James and Roy Eaglehart's memorizing a new opening monologue the day that the reviewers start to show up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was just like, you never know what's going on behind the scenes to make this stuff happen at the last minute. And it's incredible that you get to like just be all a part of this. You've got your hand in creating so much of what we now know as our regular Broadway canon. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It is. I never could have conceived that was going to happen, but it is very, very gratifying. Just to put one more pin in that, or one more element to that the failure idea is Hal Prince, I think, had the great idea. No matter every day, the morning after every show opened, whether it was the biggest flop or the biggest hit, and he had a lot of flops in his career, he had a meeting about the next show. He gathered together the team and the work for whatever the next show was supposed to be. The next morning, even if they were still hungover from the opening night.
I was about to say, he probably didn't drink the night before then.
I love that. I appreciate that. Like I'm a transformation coach, and even in my book that I wrote, I think a key way to be successful and take radical responsibility for your success is to practice what I call the 3 R's: reassessment, reframing, and resilience. Okay, so what happened? Let's look at it. Let's talk about it. What did we learn from it? Reframing. And then what do we want to change so we can show up and do it again differently?
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. And now we're back. I love it.
David, you're so cool. We could talk forever. I'm going to take your class. I'm going to audit your class. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. How do people get the book? How do they follow along with all the cool things you're doing? How can they connect with you?
So the book is available everywhere books are sold. You may have to ask your local bookstore to order it. I don't know that it'll be in stock everywhere, but they will order it, and they can order it. And please do, because supporting local bookshops, of course, is fantastic. I know you have a great one in Chicago. What's the name of the theater bookshop there?
Oh gosh. I didn't know that we had a theater bookshop here. That's embarrassing because I love indie bookstores.
You apparently have a fantastic
The Understudy Coffee and Books?
Understudy. That's exactly what it is.
Where is it, Alan?
It is, according to Google, it's the best of Chicago.
I just figured you'd already had it pulled up.
5531 North Clark, Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, so here's what I think should happen is you should come here, David, and do a reading and a book signing there, and then we can have dinner together.
Let's make that happen. I would love to do that.
Let's do it.
So
I'll help you
the
broker
book
the
is
deal.
also available online. It's on Amazon, although it's currently temporarily out of stock, which I'm taking as a very good sign because it means they didn't order enough copies to meet the demand of the last week since it was been released.
Yep.
But I recommend people go to Bloomsbury.com, the publishers of Methuen Drama is an imprint of Bloomsbury, where you can buy the book at a discount. They're doing a sort of introductory discount. And I'm so happy that the publishers have priced the book the way they did. They've released both the hardcover and the paperback at the same time,
nice.
which is unusual.
Yeah.
And the hardcover is $100. It's a
Holy
big
shit.
book. It's, but
It's
the
worth
soft
it,
cover,
but
the soft cover, which I'm holding up right here with my little notes. You see, I've got things
I have one too.
tagged there. There we go. Is $34.95.
so reasonable. Yeah.
I'm really, really happy with that.
And then you
think
go
that
and get
just makes it accessible. I was
you go-
worried that so many books have to be priced, at that is just not accessible for most people. They're books I want to buy all the time, and I think, well, that's $90. I don't know if I want to do that. This one, I'm really happy about it.
Are you going to do an audiobook?
We are in discussions about that. Yes.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun. I am so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us here today, and I can't
My
wait to stay in
pleasure.
touch.
Thank you.
It's like the
Thank you
perfect
both.
guest to blend my love with Heather's love of Broadway and
It's true.
books.
Books and history. I mean,
Yeah.
I love theater, but
Theater, books, and history. It's the perfect blend. David, thanks, man. This has been
Thank you. Thanks,
incredible.
everybody.
Dude, again with the amazing guests.
we have the best guests. Like, for real.
At the end, I was like, oh, this is a perfect combination of theater and books and history and everything. I mean, like, God, David, it talks about so much. I've known this dude forever. Every time I talk to him, I learn something new about him. And this book, I don't know if you're watching, you can see how thick this book is. It is 400 some pages here of just the most incredible knowledge about the Broadway industry you could think of. And he was telling me in a live event we were doing together last week that it was 500 something his first draft. Like, his editor really helped him cut it down and focus it and everything. But there's so much to tell about everything.
There's
that
so much
just
about
made our
people-
country who it is.
People have book limits. And I'll tell you, we have a publicist that we know within the Was It Chance family who sends really great authors our way. She sent me an ARC. It's 700 pages. I was like, I am not reading a 700 page
About
book.
what?
I'm just it's historical fiction, fantasy. There's a lot of trigger warnings, and she warned me there were trigger warnings. And then when I read the back of the book and I saw what they were, and it was 700 pages, I was like, I'm going to put this in my little free library. So I'm really sorry if you're listening to this. I'm not going to say her name. I appreciate it. Please keep sending me ARCs, but no.
So I just Googled War and Peace. It's 1,200 to 1,400 pages, depending
Okay,
on the
cool.
edition. Can take roughly 42 hours at an average reading
Yeah.
pace.
I mean, it's right. No,
This isn't War and Peace, folks.
this isn't War and Peace. David is amazing. I think it's so fun that he's at UW and Seattle, and we have the fun connection. Thanks for humoring me with all of that. I just so admire people who bring up hidden history, who make sure that these incredible humans don't go unrecognized and unnoticed in the world. It just changes things. It shifts our perspective. And it's also just cool as hell.
Like when you are obsessed with something or you love something and then you learn one fact of like, oh, did you know that this thing you love was made by or is about something that you thought you didn't like so much. And all of a sudden, just like that, your whole perception changes. It can shift how you feel about a person, a culture, or anything by learning where something you really enjoy and love has come from and what it's gone through to get right into your eyes or ears.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really cool. I love our podcast so much.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's like one of my favorite things in my whole life. I love it so much.
Pretty cool. Well, if everybody else finds it favoritely fun, where should they,
Nice.
where and how should they let us know?
Oh, yes. Please, please, please let us know. You can email us at wasitchancepodcast@gmail.com. But what we would really, really, really love you to do is go to your favorite listening platform and rate and review the show and tell us what you like about it so that other people can find us.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find us on the socials too. Like share the stuff, comment, tell us how you're out choosing bravely. So we are on almost, but not all of the platforms. We are on Instagram and Threads. We are on TikTok. We are on Blue Sky. We are on LinkedIn. I think that's it. But I'm on Substack.
There you go.
We can talk about there.
Yeah. Reach out to Heather on Substack.
It's good stuff.
I created a Substack account. I haven't done anything with it yet.
I am loving Substack. I am having a blast over there. It's a really great space for creatives to just be creative without the performativeness of it.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
I've heard good things about it. Anyway.
Oh, and we're on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, we're on YouTube. We're on YouTube.
Yeah.
And we're everywhere you find your quality podcasts.
Yeah.
Just like you're listening now. Anywho, Heather, thanks for joining me again, as always.
You're so welcome, Alan. I'll join you on our podcast that we co-produce and co-host every time.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
You're such a weirdo. You have been listening to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for your creative life. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.